The MJO retreats, but is winter to return? I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, February 25th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
Be sure and like and subscribe. To subscribe, just click the Stormsurf icon down on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Ring the bell. You get automatic notifications when the videos are posted. And if you have a comment or a question, just write it up down below. We'll be happy to answer. And if you'd like to make a contribution, you can. Support the cause. Just hit the special thanks button down below. The heart with the $sign in it. You might have to click the three little dots and then it'll expand and open up and you'll see it down there. And with that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. SV Lone Star, thank you for your generous contribution. And then our regular group of contributors, Our Predicament, Evolution Moto, IJ Ski, thank you guys so much, really appreciate it. And then a new contributor, Lake Surfer 618. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. All right, with that, let's get to work. We'll start tonight's presentation by looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean. We see a little low-pressure system off of almost Baja now with 18-foot seas. This was previously or had a little bit higher seas and has actually produced swell that's radiating back towards Hawaii, but for the most part bypassing California. Little low pressure up here in the Gulf of Alaska generating 20-foot seas off of northern British Columbia, but of no real interest. And other than that, a fairly placid pattern, at least for the moment. Let's dig a little deeper and take a look at current conditions. We're going to start by looking at the buoys. Up in Northern California, the Point Reyes buoy, 029. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting that buoy, all the way from up to 33.3 second period, real long period energy, down to 5 second period, just wind chop. We see a bump here. The peak energy at 18.2 seconds with a height of 3.8 feet, but the actual swell is the shoulder on either side as well as what's right down the middle. So you have to integrate all that energy, and then we see a little bit of wind swell and previous energy from other swells in the water. Anyway, you put this all together, primary swell 5.2 feet at 18.1 seconds from 303 degrees. We'll talk about where this is coming from, and theoretically that could make surf that's 9.4 feet if you're in an exposed break, not shadowed and all that kind of stuff. Then we have secondary swell from another gale, I think it was on Friday, residual swell 4.4 feet at 13.8 seconds from 305 degrees. Then we go down to Southern California, the Point Loma South buoy, number 191. Same drill here, same profile too. You see the beginnings of that longer period energy showing up here at 22 seconds, but size is only not even half a foot. Then a whole bunch of other mixed energy, wind swell and legitimate swell in the half a foot to 1 foot range. Put that all together, primary swell 2.3 feet at 11.8 seconds from 262 degrees, theoretically making surf in the waist-high range, probably at exposed spots, with some secondary swell 1.4 feet at 15.6 seconds, also putting surf in the thigh-high range, something like that. Then we go over to the North Shore of Oahu, the Waimea Bay buoy, number 106. Looking at the profile there, smaller energy, a mixed bit of 15, 14 second period swell, and then some wind swell. We'll see how this all plays out. Primary swell, 2.6 feet at 15.4 seconds from 320 degrees. That would be surf 4-foot Hawaiian, so I don't know, sets in the head-high range, something like that. And secondary swell, 3.3 feet at 12.1 seconds, also in about the, well, say, shoulder to head-high range. All right, so where's the swell coming from? Well, we're going to start going back in time. We're going to Tuesday, the 20th of February, so what's that, about 5 days ago. Gale developed off of Kamchatka right there. This is the Kuril Islands down here, the Aleutian Islands here. 21-foot seas. There was also a gale over in the northwestern Gulf, but swell from this system, for the most part, has all but gone. We're interested here in these seas as of Wednesday. They got to 33.7 seconds. These are the highest seas over this entire domain. Their exact position, 51 north, 170 east. So, yep, right about there. And then winds there were 49.7 knots, so almost storm force. And then we see, actually, as we got into 18Z on Wednesday, seas built to 35.7 feet and then to 39.4 feet. Now, the trick here is Hawaii's here. They had exposure. California, just barely. I mean, that's the southern tip of the Aleutian Islands right here probably shadowed most of the higher period energy here. But still, you can, even in Point Reyes, you could see that there's solid energy hitting, and there were waves today with some size. Long wait because they were coming from such a long distance away. This system here on Thursday, swell from that, already passed. Anyway, that gale faded out. This is the swell that is hitting Northern California right now. And it's probably a pretty short-lived swell. Not a whole lot going on. You saw it only existed for about 36 hours. Here we are on Saturday. Another gale started building off of Point Conception with 22-foot seas, but most of the fetch was out of the northeast, targeting Hawaii more. You don't see any momentum or push towards Southern California. It's all towards Hawaii. So, oops, and right there we got our peak seas, 22.5 feet. Okay, and then this system faded out. Anyway, you get the idea. Swell, you can see the raw seas starting to push towards the Hawaiian Islands. All right, so let's start looking to the future. We're going to start by looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales, and when those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet, and well, we see a bit of a trough here, but it's a cut-off trough. The main flow pushing off Japan here, it's consolidated with winds at 170 knots. But you see the jet just fully splits as soon as it gets off the coast of Japan and pushes north, even north of the Aleutian Islands here, and then sort of is dipping through the Gulf of Alaska. There's this cutoff trough. It was previously up here, and it was a legitimate trough, but the jet is just basically slamming into the Pacific Northwest now. This guy has no real source of energy. This was the source of that gale that we saw that's making swell pushing towards Hawaii. Anyway, what the troughs do is they create a counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure. Of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Winds, if they're strong enough, get traction. Actually, they impart energy to the ocean. We call it getting traction on the ocean surface, and generate seas. Seas are kind of a confused, raw state, a mixture of short and longer period elements. But as those seas radiate away from the fetch area, the shorter period elements, because they don't have much momentum and energy, they fade off, exposing the longer period elements of the swell. And of course, when swell hits your beach, it turns into surf. So we're looking for a trough. We have a little one here. Other than that, typically when you get this split jet stream flow, you get high pressure in between the split jet stream flow. This is like just the classic, oh, it's the end of February, the jet splits, and here comes your high pressure, probably north winds for California, and increasing trades. At least there's trades for the Hawaiian Islands versus onshore winds. So we're through with that. As we get into Monday and Tuesday, we see a trough starting to build here off of we'll say North Japan with a consolidated jet stream flow. Also, there's potential here as we get into Tuesday, and sure enough, as we get into Wednesday, another trough start building in the northern Gulf of Alaska, being fed by 150-knot winds, offering good support for gale development. Both troughs continue even into Thursday. Here we go, well set up trough. Now, this is also interesting in that this is looking more like a backdoor trough relative to California. And if you're into skiing, snowboarding, this is what you want because it drags cold air down along with the moisture that's embedded in the trough and then increases the potential for snow in higher elevations of the Sierra. All right, so looking like a backdoor trough trying to set up as we get into Friday, but also some swell production. Trough continues off of the Kuril Islands, lifting north. And then we even get into Saturday, full on, almost looks like the jets kind of split, but we'll call it a semi-atmospheric river event for California. Again, focused somewhere between Southern and Central California. And a not great trough situation. That trough, the backdoor trough starts pushing onshore Sunday, a week from now, and then moving inland with this big split jet. Not surprising that it is split, given the MJO situation. Those that follow this channel know the status of the MJO. And if you don't, we're going to talk about it in a few minutes. Next up, surface level pressure, surface level winds. The upper level jet stream affects things, but it's down at the ocean's surface that things matter. You have to have wind blowing on the ocean to create seas, to create swell. So there's the last remnants of our little low with 30 knot northeast winds, somewhat targeting Hawaii. That guy's gone as we get into Monday. The new gale starts building off Japan with 45 to 50 knot winds, and there we go, full 50 knot winds. That makes it a storm. Starting to lift north, the next gale also starts building in the northern Gulf of Alaska as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, the 28th of February, with 35 to 40 knot winds. 45 knot winds here targeting Hawaii pretty well as we're into Wednesday. Thursday, gale continues in the Gulf of Alaska. The other gale continues, but starting to fade while lifting north off the Kuril Islands. You see winds impacting California. Looks like a windy event as we get into Thursday and Friday. Continue. Another low pressure tries to organize, but gets pretty much landlocked here over the Kuril Islands, doing nothing. We're into Saturday and Sunday. Things settle down. Yes, low pressure and some fetch off the North Kuril Islands, and maybe a little something here in the Gulf of Alaska, but nothing super impressive. Notice high pressure, strong trades, typical springtime pattern setting up. Okay, let's go take a look at the effect of those winds on the ocean surface. Here we are, significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean. Our gale off of Hawaii fading out. Pretty calm pattern until we get into Tuesday, the 27th of February. Seas start building to 34 feet. I think we maybe can eke out 35 feet right there Tuesday night. Somewhat aimed at the Hawaiian Islands, but probably more to the south. The islands down here will probably get the bulk of this swell. And then the new gale starts building in the Gulf of Alaska with 25-foot seas, building to 26 feet as we get into Thursday, and then trying again, 27.7 feet. At one point, the model said 30-foot seas and pushing well towards the California coast. But the wind issues will probably be a problem. Southern California might do better. Angle kind of north, though, so do your best to find whatever swell or protected spot you can to surf. So we get into Saturday and Sunday. Another little gale up here off Kamchatka, 30-foot seas, but not doing a whole lot. And there we are, 180 hours out. And I would be remiss if I did not look south. It's a little bit early in the season, February, maybe more March is when I'd start looking. But all that said, here's New Zealand. A little gale developed on Thursday with seas building to 31.4 feet Thursday evening, southeast of New Zealand, lifting northeast into Friday morning with 29 to 30-foot seas, and then fading from 28 feet, almost not 29 feet, late Friday, and then fading from there. The point being, there is swell in the water targeting Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. The real issue is Hawaii, South Shore should for sure see surf. Northern California, probably not. Protected bakes in Southern California should probably see swell from this as well. Nothing huge, but something to start the season off. And then looking forward, well, here we are on Sunday. I'm just going to blast through this. Yes, there's a little gale with 30-foot seas, but it's falling southeast. Everything's aimed east. Yeah, maybe some swell for Chile and Peru, but not a big gale. Not particularly strong. Probably nothing for Hawaii, nothing for the U.S. West Coast from it. But as we get a little bit further out, this is more of a tease and probably not real because it's almost a week out. You never believe a model born about 4 days out. But a reasonable storm is forecast pushing under Tasmania with 37-foot seas, aimed well up into the Tasman Sea, targeting Fiji. And look at that, solid seas, theoretically, pushing the whole way up into the Tasman Sea. Very interesting indeed if this were to materialize. Seems a bit of like a phantom storm at this point in time, but something to keep your eyes on. All right, local wind forecast for California here and Hawaii. High pressure in control, trades brisk east-northeast today for the Hawaiian Islands here. We'll move to more like current time there. And a weak flow along most of the California coast. So we get into Monday, same sort of thing, weak flow, weak low pressure here holding the high pressure at bay, strong trades for the Hawaiian Islands. Tuesday, the high pressure finally starts pushing into California, northwest winds 20 to 25 knots, and strong trades 20 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Wednesday, pretty much the same thing, but then low pressure building in the Gulf, taking a notch out of the high pressure system with reduced northwest winds for California. Trades continue for the Hawaiian Islands. Thursday, here comes the front, the beginning of the south winds and likely rain with it, and maybe weather for the Sierra. Trades continue for the Hawaiian Islands, driven by high pressure north of the islands. Friday, onshore, blown out mess, at least north of Point Conception. And with the gale being as large as it is, and well off, a fetch, well-developed fetch up to 1,000 miles off the coast, days of chop setting up in the ocean. So we get into Saturday, more of the same, the low moderating some, but still an onshore flow. And then finally, once it moves in, here comes the high pressure with stacks of isobars. Trades continue solid for the Hawaiian Islands. And here we are, a week out. Maybe some relief for California from the northwest wind, but it's the beginning of the springtime pattern, it looks like. So one would expect lots of northwest winds, upwelling, and cooler water temperatures. I mean, we've really done amazingly well, even in Northern California, with water temps like 56 or even 57 as of a day or two ago. Pretty nice conditions indeed. And next, the precip forecast for California. There we go, Point Conception there, San Francisco there, and Cape Mendocino area up here, Southern California down here. As we teased in the header of the video, is winter supposed to reappear? Well, actually, this might be the first of our real winter. As we get into this, we'll show you see high pressure here driving the flow this way. You see cold air and potential low pressure up here. We'll just play this out. As we get into Monday, yes, a little bit of rain and a little bit of snow up there for the Sierra. Nothing too major. Tuesday, things clear up, but as we get into Wednesday evening, you see this building. It looks like even snow out over the ocean off of British Columbia. You know that means cold air. There's your front. Massive amounts of, I would call it more snow than rain, pushing down the Pacific Northwest, reaching into California by Thursday evening. Strong precip. Looks like it's more in the snow category than rain, and this northward direction, that's exactly what you want. Pushing into the Tahoe area and then down the Sierra as we get into Friday, and a pretty solid snow event at that, if you believe the models. Continuing into Saturday, finally starting to peter out Saturday night, but still lingering snow showers and rain showers into maybe early Sunday, and then that event is over. Let's go look at some snowfall totals. Again, it's a model. It's a week out, but we're talking 94 inches for Palisades Tahoe. Sugar Bowl looking at 96 or maybe even 100 inches, if you can believe that. Kirkwood right at 95 inches total accumulation. This would be through March 2nd. And because this is a north-falling system, not pushing onshore, Mammoth getting less, still very respectable at like 52 inches, something like that. So snow for all looks possible. Then we check freeze levels for Palisades Tahoe, good proxy for the entire Tahoe area. This is the base of Palisades at about 6,200 feet. This is the summit top of Granite Chief, and the Palisades itself right at about 9,000 feet. The so red means above freezing temperatures. Gray means if there's precipitation, potential for sleet. The line, the little spot here between the white and the gray is the 32-degree freeze line, all right? And the yellow here, or you can look at it up here, the precip starts, so 18Z on the 29th, we'll say, roughly, and you see the freeze level below the base, and then falling dramatically from there down to 3,000 feet. And then after that, trying to work its way up, but still pretty cold for multiple days, certainly seems like a good setup for good quality snow in the Tahoe area down into Mammoth. All right, let's go take a look real quick at surf projections for a couple of areas. We'll start in Northern California, Ocean Beach, San Francisco area. Waves in the 4 to maybe 5, 6 foot range, something like that. Then petering down, but still holding as we get into Wednesday and Thursday. Then you see this big jumpy thing. Yeah, 17-foot surf. Yeah, well, maybe, but also notice here's the winds. Onshore out of the west and southwest at 26, 29 knots. So it's just, there might be waves, but it's going to be a very agitated sea state, and then finally settling down from there. Pure swell, 3 feet at 12 to 13 seconds, maybe 4 feet at 15 seconds as we get into Monday, and then falling from there. 4 feet at 11 seconds, midweek sort of thing, and then things just get out of control. A mixture of all kinds of swell, and it'll just be pretty much ugly. Then we go to San Diego, protected from the storm, waves in the 1 to 2 foot range sort of thing, pretty much steadily, building up to maybe 5 feet on next weekend, Saturday, but you also see west winds in the 17 to 20 knot range sort of thing, so kind of a jumbled mess. Swell sizes 1 to 2 feet at, wind swell 8, 9 seconds, and then 1.5 feet at 12 seconds, 13 seconds, building to 2 feet or so at 17 seconds, but again, the wind will be an issue. And then we go to Oahu, fading swell from up there off Kamchatka with wave sizes down to 3 feet as we get into Monday, and even less, and staying pretty small beyond that. Maybe bumping up here as we get into Friday and Saturday in the 5, 6 foot range, and 8 feet as we get into Sunday. Let's inspect the swells here. 3 feet at 14 seconds fading. Now, this is not actually showing that northeast swell that's supposed to be sneaking into the islands, because there's stronger swell elsewhere. But there is going to be northeast swell. I think it's somewhere midweek pulling into the islands. Nothing huge, but, like 4 feet at 11 or 12 seconds, something like that. And then we get further out into the week, swell sizes 4 to 5 feet at 15 seconds for next weekend. So not a bad setup. And even better yet, you just look here, trades blowing 20 knots consistently every day, sometimes stronger, but all out of the east. That is a good thing. All right, let's go take a look long term. What's going on with the two major oscillations that affect weather and surf long term? The MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and the El Nino Southern Oscillation. And so, first up, we start looking for signs of the MJO, the active phase of the MJO. There's two phases, active and inactive phase. The short story is the active phase is the good phase, the inactive phase is the bad side. The active phase supports low pressure and actually is like a low pressure system that traverses the Pacific from west to east on the equator. Actually active and inactive phase on either side of the planet, rotating west to east around the planet on the equator. It's the active phase we want. It supports low pressure over the Pacific when the active phase is over the Pacific. And when the inactive phase is over, it supports high pressure. And so we're going to look for signs of whether the active or inactive phase is over the Pacific by looking at the data from the TAO buoy array, series of buoys strung across the equator in the Pacific used for monitoring El Nino. There's wind sensors on those buoys. And here we can look at the actual not the wind speeds for the moment, but 5-day average winds. You see they're pretty strong out of the east. The longer the arrow, the stronger the winds. Over the central Pacific, oh, this is the date line here. This is the equator here. This is New Guinea down here. Date line here, out of the east, pretty strong, and over the all-important Kelvin wave generation area here, pretty strong out of the east. But it's not the actual wind speeds that matter, it's the anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of the year. And you just look at the arrows, you go, well, it's neither east nor west here, so pretty much normal winds in the East Pacific. But once you get to the Central Pacific, you see the arrows starting to build out of the east, suggesting stronger than normal trades continuing over the far West Pacific. This looks like the inactive phase of the MJO setting up. The active phase, if it's like a low-pressure system, it dampens trade winds and will actually result in westerly anomalies. We've been watching that for a year. Multiple active phases. I think it ended up being 9 active phases from December of 2022 through December of 2023. Created multiple Kelvin waves, which ushered in El Nino and all that sort of thing. But if you've been following this, you know El Nino is on its last legs now, and we're probably transitioning to something not as favorable for swell and rainfall production. So we look at the zonal wind anomaly, the east-west component of the wind. The forecast going out 2 weeks here from the GFS model. This is past performance here. This is the forecast. The oranges and reds are westerly anomalies. Think of that as the active phase of the MJO. And let's get ourselves oriented here. The date, this is the whole planet, so that's the date line right there. The far West Pacific is the important part that matters, starting about 125 east. So from here to about right around the date line or so, we see westerly anomalies, active phase of the MJO that went through January, pretty much most of February, and now here comes the blues, the easterly anomalies setting up as the westerly anomalies get pushed further and further east into the Pacific. Sure looks like the inactive phase of the MJO is setting up as we speak and only getting stronger as we get deeper into March, filling the entire equatorial Pacific with easterly anomalies 2 weeks from now. Let's keep digging. Next up, outgoing long-wave radiation, OLR, just a fancy word for cloud cover. If the active phase of the MJO is a low-pressure system, well, low-pressure systems take warm, moist air at the ocean surface, lift it up, that hits colder air aloft, condenses into forming clouds. So this is a model, this is a statistic model here, that shows the cloud cover over the Pacific as compared to normal. South America there, Central America there, Australia, New Guinea there, the equator right there, date line right there, the all-important Kelvin wave generation area right there. When the active phase moves over this area, this is where one can reverse trade winds and create a Kelvin wave, a ball of warm water. That is, warm water is typically piled up here, driven by trade winds. And when the active phase moves over here, it slackens trade winds. Warm water can start to travel under the equator. It takes about 3 months, 4 months to make it here to Ecuador, and then it will eventually erupt off of Ecuador, creating a warm slick. If you get multiple active phases of the MJO, just like we've had over the past year, you get multiple Kelvin waves. That starts transferring all the warm water that's here over to here, and you end up with El Nino. Well, we're there, but that is starting to decay now. Anyway, back to outgoing long-wave radiation, a normal neutral pattern today, per the statistic model, neutral 5 days from now. 10 days from now, supposedly, the blues are cloudier skies, less sunlight reflecting off the ocean surface. Supposedly, the active phase of the MJO setting up to 15 days from now. The dynamic model, no surprise here, paints a completely different picture with strong high pressure, cloud-free sky, and definitely the inactive phase of the MJO setting up over the next 2-day period. Here's the comparison. Statistic model with the active phase, supposedly forecast. The dynamic model with the inactive phase. Let's keep digging. Phase diagrams. All these show is where the active phase of the MJO is and how strong it is. The MJO moves west-east from the Indian Ocean over the maritime continent, to the West Pacific, to the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot is where the active phase is. The further the dot is away from the circle, like out here, the stronger the active phase is. So you can see back in 16th, 17th, I think this was January, strong active phase of the MJO over the maritime continent made its way over the West Pacific. Now here we are in February. The MJO is crashing. It's basically non-existent. The forecast has it maybe very, very weakly showing up in the West Pacific 2 weeks from now. But the dynamic model says no, active phase building to moderate strength, but over in the maritime continent, like Bali, nowhere near the Pacific. So pretty much inactive phase would be, if the active phase is here, the inactive phase is roughly on the other side of the chart. So no hope for the active phase for the Pacific for the next 2 weeks. Here's another upper level model, potential for precipitation at the Jetstream level. The greens are areas favorable for precipitation, the active phase of the MJO. Let's get ourselves oriented. South America, Central America, New Guinea there, the equator right there, the date line roughly there. This is a statistical model suggesting the active phase right now is over in the far West Pacific. We don't see any signs of that. And then moving into South and Central America as we get into, March 11th or so, with the inactive phase setting up, traversing the Pacific into about the end of March, and then the active phase reappears. So the statistic models and the dynamic models are on opposite ends of the spectrum here. Then we look at the CFS model, 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies, east-west component of the wind. Dateline runs right up the middle here. Now this has the MJO on it, the solid contour, so you can see back. Oh, well, if the dateline's right here, the area that we're really interested in is from about here, 125 east, to about 170 west. You can see in the past, dotted contour, inactive phase, solid contour, active phase of the MJO back in December. In late December, early January, inactive phase and easterly anomalies in control. And then as we got late into January, here was our active phase with westerly anomalies. As of about 3 days ago, that was all falling apart. And the forecast looking forward just looks like mostly easterly anomalies, not too strong, not as strong as what we had up here, and no real, at least in this version of it, no indication of an MJO signal, but still easterly anomalies in control for the next 4 weeks. Certainly looks like the inactive phase of the MJO. Let's go look at one more model. Here is the CFS model going out 3 months, past performance down here, the forecast up here. Dateline runs right up the middle. Kelvin wave generation area starts about 125 east, so starting about here over to around here. You can see past westerly wind events, the oranges and yellows here back in November, the big one in December, inactive phase and easterly anomalies in January, our last big active phase here in February, and then here you see easterly anomalies, but still with some lingering westerly anomalies forecast, and then not till April do we see the reemergence of westerly anomalies. Let's overlay the MJO, see if we got it there. Sure enough, there was our active phase. That's officially over now, the dotted contour. Inactive phase setting up from now through about March 28th. So the entire month of March. If anything, if there's a time for there not to be surf, it would probably be during the inactive phase of the MJO. That's not to say there aren't gales and there wouldn't be surf, but it just wouldn't be typically big roaring dateline kind of storms. The other thing, though, is during these inactive phases, you get a pretty good potential for those backdoor slider kind of cold fronts. So this is something to keep our eye on. There might be, with all the latent heat and precip or moisture embedded in the atmosphere from El Nino, which is still in control, and then you get cold air and the jet stream splitting. The inactive phase will typically split the jet, just like what we saw in the charts earlier. But that's what sets up those backdoor sliders. The lows, they tend to go further north over the date line in the Bering Sea. and then fall down the coast of British Columbia and the U.S. West Coast. So we'll keep our eyes on this. Anyway, active phase of the MJO forecast is set up March 20th, continue pretty much through the whole month of April, and then after that, we're in a springtime pattern. Another active phase forecast after that, but by then, things should be really settling down, and we should be starting to look more at the southern hemi than the northern hemisphere. Let's overlay the low-pass filter here. Here we go. This is the El Nino signal. Solid contour, low-pressure bias, peak of El Nino from just a pure meteorological standpoint was November 5th through about January 8th, something like that. That was 4 contours. The third contour is supposed to die off here, we'll say about March 17th. The second contour fading late April, and the final low-pressure bias contour holding well past May. The high-pressure bias, here it is, over the maritime continent, and that just kind of dissipating, but the El Nino signal still holding, at least for a bit. At some point, we're going to be looking for this high-pressure bias to start building over the dateline, but probably not until September or something like that. All right, enough of the MJO. Let's go look even longer term. El Nino, La Nina, what's going on in the ocean? We're going to start by looking down in the ocean across the equator, from the East Pacific here to the far West Pacific here. Data from the TAO buoy array. These are the buoys. These are the anchor lines on the buoys going down to the bottom of the ocean. This is depth, 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters. And these little X's are sensors on the anchor lines. The sensors collect water temperature data. Then you use a model to fill in the gaps in between, and you get a profile of where the warm and cold water is in the Pacific. Remember earlier in the presentation I said during El Nino, all the warm water tends to pull up over here. Well, now you can see it's retreating and building more in the West Pacific. The 30-degree isotherm is retreating. It used to be like over, 170 or something, but it's down to like 168 east now. The 29-degree isotherm, it's holding at about 177 west, 176, but it is too retreating. The 28-degree isotherm at 160, it was 140, and at one point earlier this winter was over at 110. You still see a little bit of it right there. The 24-degree isotherm was down at 50 meters deep at one point. Now it's 25 meters deep, suggesting the warm pool here is getting shallower and shallower and shallower as trades take the warm water here, start pushing it back to the east, and as there is no more Kelvin waves pushing east to replenish the warm pool in the east. And the way you can see that better is here by looking at the anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of the year. You can see here, obvious, cold water now setting up, pretty much filling, the isotherm is right here, the main travel line. But if it were a Kelvin wave were to form, it would have to go through this area. It has to go down deep, 150 meters deep. Otherwise, it will never make it over to the far East Pacific. We see the last little bit of our warm water, 2 degrees here at, what is that? That is about 128 west, and 3-degree temperatures right here at 110 west. And you see the cold water, it's actually pushing up, squeezing this warm water to the surface, and then the trades are dragging it off this way. This warm water here is more a function of the trades taking whatever was left of El Nino's warm pool and pushing it off here. In fact, we have another view of that here. We can make this a little bit bigger, I think. Here we go. And you can see the cool pool well-defined, the last of the warm water right off of Ecuador here at 3 degrees above normal from 90 west. So that's really nothing. That's like from the Galapagos into Ecuador, and then dragging along here. But you see the cool pool trying to push up, trying to make its way to the surface. It has momentum, and it's pushing this way. It's going to squeeze the last of the warm water to the surface, and then it all just bleeds off this way. And that's the end of our El Nino. Sea level anomaly data. Okay, Chile, Peru, Ecuador here, the Galapagos right there. This is the equator. This is the date line here. Here's New Guinea. You want to see reds all filling, or at least oranges and yellows filling this area. Positive anomalies. What does this say? This is the height of the ocean. That is, you take a satellite, measures the height of the ocean over the entire Pacific, actually the whole planet, and then you strip out the tides, the waves, the wind waves, and you see if the sphere of the ocean is higher or lower than normal. Well, why would that matter? Well, if you have cold water at depth, cold water tends to contract, and it'll displace water down and create a divot on the ocean's surface. Conversely, warm water expands, and when it does, it displaces water above it upwards and creates a bump on the ocean surface. So, the main area you're interested in is right here, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. You see -5, that's negatives. This is all 0 to -5 in here. This whole area for months was all positive anomalies. All you see is the last lingering bits of it, mainly here off of Ecuador. And then all this stuff is just not part of what matters anymore. Basically, this is saying what we saw in the previous charts. There is no warm water at depth other than a little bit right here. Everything else is colder than normal water, and the end of El Nino is well underway. Upper ocean heat anomalies. This really tells the story here. This is the the West Pacific here. The East Pacific here. Kelvin waves, you can see them. This was the previous last remnants of La Nina back in February of 2023. And then here was Kelvin. This is Kelvin wave number 2. That's warm water pushing across the Pacific. Number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6 in August, number 7 in October, number 8 in November, and there was actually a number 9 right here in December. But at the same time, you see the building cool pool in the West Pacific and its eventual track off to the east, now poised to make it the whole way across to Ecuador, and at some point it will erupt to the surface, and that will be the end of it. But for now, we're in pretty good shape. So it's really interesting now. We go look at the surface level sea surface temperature anomalies. Chile, Peru, Ecuador, South or Central America, Hawaii out here. You see the oranges and red, all positive anomalies, above normal temperatures. This is from multiple 9 Kelvin waves that erupted in this area up to the surface, and the trades take that warm water, start dragging it off to the west. We still have a clear El Nino signal at the moment, but we know somewhere right around in here, in the next couple of weeks, that cold water that's down below the ocean surface is going to start erupting here. And then that will be officially the end of our El Nino. The sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days, there we are. You see warm water, this is being squeezed to the surface, the last of the warm pool being squeezed to the surface. But at the same time, you also see bits of weekly cooling temperatures here directly along the equator. But for the most part, right now, kind of a neutral pattern. But at some point, this is going to start going deep blue. The backed off view here, you see still plenty of warm water off of, here's Peru, Ecuador, the Galapagos. Still your classic El Nino warm triangle in place. So we're doing okay for the moment. Here's the sea surface temperature anomaly trend over time and area. East Pacific right here. West Pacific right here. The first emergence of the first Kelvin waves back in March in the East Pacific building, warm water building and coverage. The peak of our El Nino in terms of warm water coverage right in here somewhere in November, December time frame, but still holding decently into January. But now that we're into February, you see this was 1 to 1.5 degree above normal temperatures here. And the official El Nino region starts at 120 west and goes to 170 west. So right up here the whole way down the chart. Temperatures still warm, but starting to cool. The sea surface temperature trend in the Nino 1.2 region, the area right there by Ecuador and the Galapagos, holding reasonably well, if anything, trending upward the past 1, 2, 3 weeks. We know why that is. That's the cold water underneath pushing the last of the warm water to the surface. Temperatures at 994 thousandths of a degree above normal, right at about 1 degree above normal. And then in the official El Nino monitoring region, now this is not the real data, but it's close enough. It gives you the trend slowly sinking temperatures at 1.129 degrees above normal. Actually, the real temperature is probably somewhere around 1.5. This reads low, but it suggests, at least for the minute or the moment, that El Nino and its affected warm temperatures are still in control, and that is affecting the jet stream above it. That's affecting the global weather pattern. Maybe not as strong as we would have liked for this El Nino, but still having an effect nonetheless. And then when you start getting the backdoor sliders, what I talked about earlier, with all this warm moisture up in the atmosphere, the potential for snowfall starts increasing. So what does the atmosphere think is going on? We look at the Southern Oscillation Index, the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Tahiti in the Pacific, Darwin roughly in the Indian Ocean. When pressure is lower in Tahiti, the index goes negative. Well, not negative today, 2.83. But if you go back a little bit here, we were quite negative. We had a good run during this active phase of the MJO in, when was that, February, and actually looked like El Nino. We got down to a daily reading of minus 46.54, but with the active phase fading out, the index is returning to neutral. The 30-day average is a good way to look at active and inactive phase. Today's value, minus 18.49. We got down to 19.36. If we were in a really solid El Nino, I would expect to see this guy hovering down in the 20s and 25s, but it just never happened. We'll look at the charts here in a minute. The 90-day average, minus 5.29, basically hovering just below neutral and never has really done a whole lot since. Let's go look at a graph. Here's our 30-day moving SOI all graphed out back in 22, and in 22, this was when we were in La Nina, all positive values, hovering up around 20. Then in 2023, we started falling negative. Sure looked like we were just moving into a barn buster El Nino in June. And then in July, for whatever reason, it just stalled and kind of fell apart and went neutral. Tried to regroup. We got some values down around minus 13 or 15. Into October, and then completely lost it, moving almost back into La Nina territory. Now with the latest active phase, we bottomed out down here at 20 or 18 or something, but this is quickly going to be heading up. This sort of speaks to that thing, and we've done some analysis around this. El Nino was supposedly a strong El Nino, but it was fighting the PDO, which is like a super long-running La Nina. And we've been in that position since the last the major El Nino of 97, 98. We've been in the cold phase of the PDO ever since, and that really, I think, took a hit on our this developing El Nino. That was also, the PDO is also attributable to that drought that we had, that multi-year drought. The good news is, with the development of this El Nino, we got a bunch of rain last winter, and this winter we're not showing the charts, but we're going to be pretty close to normal rainfall, if not above rainfall, for most of California. Sierra snow-wise, not as nearly as good, but that's not a function of precipitation. That's a function of temperature. It's just been so warm that you get piles of precipitation, but it doesn't form snow because it's not cold enough. It just rains on the mountains. So from a rainfall perspective, I think we're going to be okay. Sea surface temperature forecast for the Nino 3.4 region from the CFS version 2 model, the official El Nino region. So here we saw back in December our temperatures spiking out right at 2 degrees. January, mid-January, fading a little bit to like 1.85. And then here we are mid-February, theoretically down maybe around 1.5. And this model just shows temperatures crashing from here down to minus 2.1 degrees as we get into October. Clearly a La Nina scenario. There's a more moderate version. The PDF corrected this version of this model, shows temperatures still down to minus 1.55 as we get into November. Let's go look at the consensus model real quick. It just updated this week. Here's the graphical output for all El Nino models for February 2024. 0. This is neutral right here. Here is our El Nino setup right here where we've been. You see all the models have temperatures crashing from half a degree above to half a degree below is neutral. But so let's see, maybe we can pull this out here. The green there. Whoops, get it. I can't quite get it. Anyway, the green model and the blue here, that's the CPC consensus. The red is the this is the dynamic average. The green is, oh, there we go. I got it. There it is. Statistic average. It has temperatures going down to minus 1. The CPC consensus has half a degree, and the dynamic models have about 1 degree. Let's go look at some more details. So here's the dynamic models. An average of all the dynamic models going down to about 1 degree, minus 9.88, and this is like in the October time frame. That's probably about as low as it'll get. The statistic models saying minus 0.992 versus 0.988, and then you put it, the average of all the models, 0.990. So 1 degree below normal. So half a degree is neutral, right? Half a degree below normal. So if we're just down in the 1 degree, yes, that's La Nina, but that's not a horrible La Nina. And that is certainly better than what the CFS version 2 model says. Let's see if we can actually find it in here. Where is it? Dynamic models. Where is it? There it is, right there. Oh, now this version of it here, not looking so bad, but I would say, yeah, because when we looked on the previous chart, we were down in the minus 2 range. So a little bit of some funkiness going on here. But for now, all the models generally saying about 1 degree below normal. That wouldn't be the end of the world if that was what happens. So for right now, looks like there is some stormy swell setting up for California and also a pretty good-sized gale off of Japan setting up swell for Hawaii. And eventually some of that might make it into California. But probably the bigger story is a supposed real winter storm setting up for the Pacific Northwest down into California. We'll see if it materializes. It's still almost a week out, but it's been on the charts for a while now. We'll watch the details. Presumably, the amounts of actual snow will be something less. The model always overhypes it about 6 days out. But the good news is that would give much needed snowpack to the Sierra. That would also provide a good amount of moisture into the rest of California, mainly north of Point Conception, to probably get us very close to 100% of normal, not just for this time of year, but for the entire season. And if we get another 1 or 2 of those behind it, we'll be even in better shape. So we'll see how this plays out. Things are cautiously optimistic from a rainfall and snowfall perspective. And it's the inactive phase of the MJO. We know that the surf isn't going to be great during the inactive phase, but another active phase is coming about a month out, so we'll still have plenty of opportunity. And typically during El Nino years, winter tends to linger, at least from a surf perspective, into April, if not May. So I think the Pacific is not done doing what it's going to do. Yes, this El Nino has grossly underperformed as compared to what we had hoped it would do, no thanks to the PDO. But that's not to say that there isn't some hope that there is more swell to come and that this whole season isn't shutting down immediately. So for right now, we're cautiously optimistic. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. The algorithm appreciates it. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you have questions or comments, write them up. We'll be happy to respond. If you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you can. Click the special thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. And other than that, thanks for watching. We're going to try to do this next week, same time, same channel, but if the snow's really good, we might have to defer that. So I'll send out a message to everyone that's subscribed and let you know as we get closer to the time. All right, thanks for watching, and we'll do this again, if not next week, the week after. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.